Metal Gear Solid series is genuinely one of my all-time favorite franchises. In fact, I still remember playing that old demo disc for the first game ad nauseum. Plus, I've still got my original PS2 memory cards with both my save files for MGS2 and MGS3. So yeah, when I heard that Konami were remaking Snake Eater, along with a whole bunch of other people, I got pretty damn excited. Making it the second game they've remade as well, alongside Silent Hill 2, and also the second time a game in a series was remade before its predecessor, which arguably needed and deserved it much more.
No, I'm serious.
Either way, though, Metal Gear Solid 3, or Delta, or whatever I'm supposed to call it, is finally here. And it dawned on me after I'd spent a fair bit of time with this thing that it really isn't aimed at someone like me.
I'm glad to hear that.
I mean, this is far less Resident Evil 4 and Final Fantasy 7 and a lot more Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Really just updating that original game into a newer engine and keeping everything else the same, which in some ways is both a good and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because I've finished that original game more times than I can remember. I know all the plot twists and revelations, and I'm certainly not going to try to go back in there and beat this thing again on European Extreme, or shoot all the Keratan frogs, or try to eat every piece of food.
Pretty tasty.
Yeah, you two can go through the rain and feed on a tree frog. You can fight a dude who can shoot out hornets and climb up gaming's most well-known singing ladder. So this is still Metal Gear Solid 3 through and through, and yeah, if that's all you want to know, well, then you can probably just stop the video right now.
Freeze.
Because all that's going to be coming after this is a whole lot of old man yelling at cloud energy.
Don't you forget it.
And off the back of that, this isn't really going to be a review for Metal Gear Solid 3 directly. At least in the sense that I'm not going to talk about the game in any kind of great detail. I did a video on it already anyway, so if you want to know what it's all about and what I think about it overall, well, then go watch that. Because what I want to talk about the most here is the remake itself. And a lot of what I said there would apply here anyway as well, as this is really a beat-for-beat remake of that original game. Almost, 99% across the board.
Does it look that strange to you?
Along with the environments and more importantly the mechanics you play with. Before I get too far into things though, I do have to thank Acecraft Sky Hero for sponsoring this video. You a fan of old games with art styles like Cuphead? Well, then yeah, you'll love Acecraft Sky Hero. Also inspired by the black and white rubber hose animation style of the 1930s. And bringing that classic aesthetic to modern shooters. If like Saturday morning cartoons suddenly turn into a boss rush. And yeah, this game is an absolute throwback. I mean, if you grew up with old school shooters in smoky arcades, then you're gonna feel right at home. What I really like about this thing is how compact it is. I mean, each run really only lasts about 5 minutes. But inside those 5 minutes, it's like someone's bottled up pure chaos. You got waves of bullets filling up the screen, there's bosses rolling in one after the other, and you get that feeling of just one more try that really kept us all hooked back in the arcade era. Just like they've taken all the best aspects of traditional bullet hell games and then condensed it all down. And then you got the bullet reversal mechanics. Yeah, sometimes the game throws these pink bullets at you, but instead of actually avoiding them, you can absorb them. If you time it right, you can then send that barrage straight back. Which is kind of like nailing a perfect parry in something like Street Fighter, allowing skilled players to really create their own ultra-fast routes through the levels, making it not just about survival, but also skill and domination. Not to mention, there's even a 2-player co-op mode in there as well, just like all of the best shoot-'em-ups. So if you're into that mix of retro charm combined with the modern twist, well then yeah dog, check out Acecraft Sky Hero. Use the link in the video description or scan that QR code on the screen to download the game now, and join the fun with this upcoming Tom and Jerry crossover. Let's fly together, laugh together, and play together in Acecraft Sky Hero. And yeah, once again, thanks to these guys for sponsoring this video. The basic gist is you're playing as Big Boss back when he was given the code name Snake, heading into the Soviet Union in the 1960s to rescue a Russian scientist.
You're CIA. Yeah.
Only to then be betrayed by his former mentor, the boss, who, as it turns out, is defecting.
What are you doing here?
Sokolov comes with me.
Also given a Russian sadist named Colonel Volgin nuclear weapons. Yeah, that'll end well.
These will make a fine gift for me.
This can't be happening.
Anyway, after uncovering this and getting his shit pushed in, Snake's then sent back in with the updated objective to still rescue that scientist. But then to also assassinate the boss, and then stop Volgin from using a prototype tank called the Shagohod to cause all-out nuclear warfare. You with me?
Ah, what a joyful scene.
Apart from that, Snake has to also deal with the former members of the boss's Special Forces unit called the Cobras. They're a band of weirdos with different abilities, one of whom is aforementioned old mate who can control hornets. Then he's assisted along the way by an undercover agent named Eva, who's in stark contrast to every other female character in the MGS games, who are more often than not just complete tomboys.
Well, I'm Eva. Are you here to tempt me?
Bitch, are you for real?
All whilst moving through these jungle and interior areas, either avoiding enemies or engaging them in all-out combat. As Captain Planet used to say, the power is yours. I mean, yeah, man, like, there's so many little ways you can mess around with the AI here and the environment that it's a borderline immersive sim at times. Even down to just the sheer amount of different camouflage patterns you can acquire for Snake's uniform or face, along with eating every single thing, living or dead, that isn't nailed down.
Pretty tasty.
It's kind of like what happens when From Russia with Love meets Apocalypse Now, and you never quite know what's really going on here, with some really awesome revelations towards the end of the story. It's got one of the most poignant endings of all time, and it's a perfect origin point for Snake's tragic and complicated character arc into becoming Big Boss. And look, man, like, regardless of how you feel about it, or Kojima for that matter, the game's widely regarded as a masterpiece, and yeah, that's praise well earned. So I guess in some ways it is kind of good that they didn't really bugger around with any of the dialogues or cinematics in that regard. Like, Kojima might be a bit of a weirdo, but he knew what he was doing here with the writing, and most of that stuff still holds up, I think, even by today's standards.
Pretty good.
Yeah, all of it, including all that weird, goofy stuff that's become the guy's trademark. Which means you can still check out Eva's boobs along with her other assets, you can still watch Snake get grabbed on the dick, and there's still posters of good-looking Japanese babes plastered all over the walls, as based as it's always been. In fact, the resolution for these is so high now that you can clearly make out the models on the front of those magazines.
Claude have mercy.
I have seen people saying that certain lines in some conversations have been changed around, but the only thing I noticed directly was that during the cinematic, when Snake's getting a hard-on over the gun that Eva gives him, they're a bit more overzealous there with the camera zooms and the sound effects, but really, like, that's about it.
A long type trigger with non-slip grooves. A ring hammer.
Visually, however, every single asset, model and texture has been massively overhauled, and there are definitely things here which objectively do look a lot more detailed. Snake, for instance, looks awesome, and his character model is super intricate, even down to being able to see individual hairs on his beard. When you got a face camo equipped during cinematics, you can quite literally see it smeared across him, giving it an actual texture and a bit of depth instead of it just looking like flat paint. And go crawling through the mud or take too many bullets, and all this stuff is going to show up in ensuing cutscenes as well. Even during that final cinematic in the graveyard, his facial animations are improved to the point that it absolutely emphasizes all that internal turmoil and the pain that he's going through. Eva looks amazing as well, really highlighting that sexual nature to her character. You know, being this honeypot operative meant to lure Snake in with her wily charms.
Crikey.
And I like to how you can actually tell now that she's got a pair of bolt-ons.
We've got company. It's the Ocelot unit.
I mean, in that original game, they didn't really have all that much volume to them, making it surprising to find out that they're not real, but now I can spot those things from a mile away.
Does it look that strange to you?
I do like some of the other updated effects as well, like the way that the fire and the flames look when you go up against the Fury, and during that whole exchange, you can see Snake's reflection in the Fury's helmet a whole lot better.
I came back from space.
And when Volgan's charging electricity through his body, the way the light is cast off those smaller bolts to highlight sections of his face looks really impressive. So yes, like, there are legitimate visual upgrades in certain places. However, this is still absolutely one of those times where a soul versus soulless argument could be put forward. And while yes, like, everything might be improved technically, it's kinda come at the expense of the game's overall art style. For instance, in certain areas, the image just ends up looking completely washed out and kinda dull. Like during one of the earlier areas inside the swamps with all the crocodiles, and then not too long after that when you're up against your first fight with Ocelot. There's just a flatness and a lack of vibrancy to the overall image, you know, compared to that original game where everything really seemed to pop out. And look, like, say what you will about PlayStation 2 games, but at least games from back in that era had a distinct look and feel. There was something undeniably unique and recognizable about titles from that generation. And you can almost always look at a PS2 game, emulated or native, and in fact especially native, and tell what it is. Plus, there was always like a visual consistency with games in a series back then, where each entry really looked the same as the last one. Which is why Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 looked like a Metal Gear Solid game. Even the same could be said about MGS4 and then MGS5. Delta, on the other hand, it looks like an Unreal Engine 5 game. And if you've ever played an Unreal Engine 5 game that's got a forest as its backdrop, well, then this really is gonna feel very familiar. Guess that's the problem with an engine that's made to appeal to everyone, is that it just ends up looking like everything else. The best example, I think, is during this bit when you're moving through that waist-high river after you've just come out of the caves. Now, in the original, this had an oddly serene and calming look to it, making it one of the most memorable environments in the game. Here, though, it just looks like any old boring jungle.
What a pisser.
It's all just got that undeniable Unreal Engine feel to it, especially with things like the reflections, the rain, the water effects, and the motion blur. Yeah, goddamn son, the motion blur. Turning that off was the first thing I did after seeing how awful it looked in the intro. Now, you can mess around with the colors here in the options menu, and in fact there's even a legacy filter they've included which is supposed to change the color grade so it looks more in line with the original. But this legacy filter is just that, it's a filter, and it doesn't fix the underlying visuals or the overall aesthetic choices that they've made here.
This place is a dump.
Even the main menu is really weak compared to the original. Like, how did we go from this, right? Something so awesome and stylish. To then just this. I've also seen people saying online that the game runs really crappy on their PC, which luckily I haven't had an issue with, but it wouldn't surprise me given how temperamental UE5 seems to be these days. What I have seen though, and what I think is kind of funny, is how because of those buffering issues with the engine, every time you open the Cure menu, there's a bit of a delay there before Snake's model appears. Yeah, every time. But at least they can patch that stuff, maybe, and improve it. What they can't improve is an entire game's art style. And I guess it all comes back to what I said at the beginning, like how this remake doesn't really seem aimed at people like me, who are gonna harp and crap on about this stuff to begin with. In fact, let me put it another way. Do you think the image on the left looks worse off than the one on the right? Do you care? If you answered no to either of those questions, and I don't mean this as an insult, but guess what? You're the target demographic for this remake. Before I get too far into any other criticisms though, I do want to talk about the stuff I like. For starters, I really like it how they've streamlined a lot of the mechanics, like with the way the codec calls work for instance, letting you quickly choose a contact from a menu without having to first open up that codec screen. So if you want to quickly save your game, it's now a much faster process.
Saving the game, Snake?
And off the back of that, I like it too how they've added in autosaves. I mean, look, no one's stopping you from making a hard manual save if you want to, but the basic advent of an autosave to prevent too much loss of time is hardly a bad thing. What's even better than that is how you can now swap through camouflage patterns near instantly, with, again, another similar pop-up menu to the codec one. Now, this used to be kind of tedious in the original game, where you'd have to artificially pause everything around you, go through a few screens and select the camo you wanted before then backing out again. And it's not that it was a bad feature, but it did sort of ruin the flow of things if you did it too much, which meant that I'd often just get like a middle-of-the-road pattern, the one that got me through most areas, and then stick with that. Here though, that process is a lot easier and quicker, and although it only seems to include recent combinations you've used, it's still way faster than doing it manually. So yes, this is a genuine improvement.
Loud and clear.
And off the back of that, I really like all of the wacky new camo patterns and outfits you get in here too. I mean, weird and goofy shit is the cornerstone of this series. And being able to run around covered in gold paint or dressed like a crocodile is every Metal Gear Solid fan's God-given right. And then finally, I do like how they've kept in most of the meta fourth wall breaking stuff, like being able to cause a time paradox by killing Ocelot.
You've created a time paradox.
There's the return of that Guy Savage mode and the snake versus monkeys, which so many people seem to be fans of, even though I've never really cared for it personally. But hey, the point is that it's there, both of which were lacking in that HD and Master Collection. The biggest change they've made though is with these two different playstyles and control methods you got to choose from when beginning a new playthrough, with there being both a new style and a so-called legacy style. Now, the new style adds in a modern action game control scheme with an over-the-shoulder viewpoint where you can move around freely while aiming your weapons, compared to the original where you were kinda locked into place when manual aiming. This new style also makes updates to the UI, like for instance, if you get injured, you get a bit of a notification on the side of the screen, like you got in a DM or something letting you know that you need to be fixed up. For some reason too, the camo index is now at the bottom at the center of the screen, along with your health, as opposed to the top right, which, I don't know, I guess is supposed to make it easier to see. And then during boss fights, you'll see their health bars get grayed out during points when the boss is invulnerable, during an animation or something like that where you can't damage them so you don't waste more ammo. As for the legacy style, this uses the apparent same controls as the original game, along with that semi-fixed overhead camera from the original version of Snake Eater, which is a version that most fans would agree is completely redundant since the release of that Subsistence Edition, which added in the option to swap back and forth between the fixed but then also that third-person camera, where all you had to do was just press down the right thumbstick, a feature which, by the way, has been used in every other version of that original game, with the HD collection and all its variants, even through to the one for the Nintendo 3DS. However, for some reason now with this remake, we don't get the option to swap back and forth, and instead you need to manually change the entire style to do this. Which, yeah, like might sound fine, but doing this also restarts you from the last checkpoint, along with completely changing the overall button layout.
Are you serious?
So yeah, it's like the basic convenience of a camera perspective able to be changed with a simple button press is now completely gone. Something which I'd argue is a legacy feature, you know, given it's been in the games now for almost 2 decades. And the reason it's a bit of an issue is because there's genuinely times here when the fixed camera comes in handy, but then there's also genuinely times when the manual camera comes in handy too. So not being able to swap between these at your own whim is more or less handicapping yourself when each situation arises. You might say, but hey G-Man, it's supposed to be that way. It's the legacy style. And yeah, maybe I'd agree with you if, like I said, this hadn't been a feature since 2005. So it's like, what are we doing here? Are we adding in features or are we taking them away? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense!
There's nothing for you here.
I also found the default button mapping with the legacy style to be really clunky, with the first person view bound to the right bumper or R1, aiming with a weapon to the left trigger or L2, and then firing with the right trigger, R2. Plus then, instead of aiming with the left thumbstick, you aim with the right, which feels super awkward, because you're now holding down 3 buttons with one hand whilst you're doing all of this. You want to know how you aimed and fired a gun in the original games? Well, you pressed R1 to go into first person mode and then you pressed the square button. That was it. As for the new style, well, this definitely feels more in line with the modern games, in particular how the shooting and the movement felt in MGS4 and 5. We can freely move around the camera, but then also freely move around Snake when aiming down sights, and popping in and out of first person view quickly, which definitely feels way more organic than the legacy style. Not that it really makes things all that much easier anyway, and about all it's useful for is if you need to shuffle to the side a bit when you're aiming to peek around a corner or something. The biggest difference with this style though is how they've added in bullet drop, which mostly just seems to affect the MK22, making it a whole lot trickier to hit enemies from long range. And I find this to just be completely baffling. Like, I thought this was supposed to be a newer control scheme with more modern controls, something that's supposed to appeal to the kind of people who are maybe turned off by that limited movement and the basic aiming options in that original. Only they completely negated that by adding in this insane bullet drop for one of the guns that most players are going to be using the most. So which is it, man? Like, are we trying to make this thing easier or harder for newcomers? And look, I get it, that original pistol was more or less a laser pointer, so maybe they thought they had to add in bullet drop to balance it out. To that I say, they did balance it by having suppressors that broke after a bunch of shots and making ammo a lot more limited. It was already balanced, it didn't need to drop off in an arc the shape of a goddamn donkey's dick. Plus, simply being able to tag headshots at long range was a balancing skill check in itself. It was the reward for having steady aim and good accuracy. Also, why the fuck are we even talking about balancing something in a single player game to begin with? I have also noticed as well that the hit detection seems to be off at times, almost with all the weapons, and regardless of the style you're playing in, bullets look like they should be hitting someone but often just pass right through them.
Meanwhile...
And I really feel like all of this could have been alleviated if they just had have included some kind of custom option for the controls, letting players choose what kind of control options they personally wanted, instead of lumping them into two very strict and different modes. The other thing is that irregardless of what style you go with, the controls also seem to be a bit sluggish, like everything takes half a second longer now to actually happen. As if someone at Konami studied at the Red Dead Redemption 2 school of player animations, or like there's some kind of video game law now where fast, snappy controls just aren't allowed anymore. I mean, seriously, dog, like how is it possible that an almost 20-year-old game that this remake is based off is somehow more responsive than its modern day update? About the only thing it seems they've kept in there is how you can quickly unequip and re-equip weapons to get past that reload animation, which is really handy against bosses. But everything else here just feels slower, like it's been over-animated. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I also found the CQC to be really janky as well. Now instead of just being able to simply run up to someone and slam them down with the press of a button and the thumbstick, you instead just hold down the interact button? Which, yeah, sounds fine if it wasn't so finicky and inconsistent. And I've lost count the amount of times I've run up to someone and started to hold that button down, only for the takedown to simply not work. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, man, but I do know that I never had an issue with this in that original game. It's even worse with the final fight against the boss. Oh, sorry, spoilers. Because for this, there doesn't seem to be that exclamation mark above her head, which indicates when you're supposed to counter.
Let's see what you're...
The window just seems to be much shorter now, and whenever she attacks you, you get this unskippable animation you're forced to sit through, of her pulling your gun apart and breaking it.
Nice try.
Yes, I know that was in the original. Kinda got to the point there where the only way I was able to consistently counter her was just by mashing the punch button when she started charging me, which is kinda dumb. I mean, this was supposed to be a fight about the culmination of all of Snake's training. Every experience, combat, encounter, and battle he'd fought up until that point was supposed to be coming to a head against the woman who trained him. All that was left to do was beat her and become the boss.
The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny.
And yeah, I did that by mashing the buttons over and over like Dark Side Phil, because the game wasn't really communicating to me what the timing is supposed to be here. Honestly though, that's the least of the issues this fight has going on.
Get ready!
There are a few other like little control changes that I'm not too happy with, like with the cigarette spray for instance, you have to manually aim it before you can use it. In the original game, you could just walk around with this thing hanging out of your mouth the entire time, and then just fire it off when you got near someone to knock them out. Easy. Here though, you've got to stop for a second, manual aim, and fire. And what is it with this game adding in more needless inputs than it needs? Also, the range on it seems to be less, which is doubly weird considering you can literally see the gas clipping through people whilst having no effect.
Breathe it in.
I did notice as well that some of the exploits seem to be removed now, like the one against the Fear for instance, where you had that one where you could cheap him out by pretending to be dead, and then hitting him from behind with a flashbang, which, yeah, no longer works now. But at least on a positive side, it's going to be interesting seeing the speedrunners coming up with entirely new strats, so I don't know, I guess that's a good thing. At the end of the day, it really just comes back to that question of, did we really need this? Like, was Metal Gear Solid 3 some kind of dated old relic that needed to be remade so a fresh new audience could appreciate it? I mean, it's not like this was some super hard to find game only available on a couple of platforms. We've had the HD collection, which came with both MGS2 and Peace Walker out now for over a decade. And then even recently, that got updated with the Master Collection. So people on the more modern consoles and PC could also easily experience all of these games. And while originally I would have advised that people treated that Master Collection like syphilis and stayed well away, they've done a good job of patching this up recently, and it's in a pretty good state now. So I'd argue that over the years, more men have ran through Metal Gear Solid 3 than they have your mum.
I see. 4 of them.
But then compare it to Silent Hill 2, right? Which, on the other hand, was a bit trickier to get into and much more suited for a remake.
Yeah, you could say that.
Where your only options there were the original PS2 or the Xbox version, downloading a PC port along with a fan-made enhanced edition mod, or playing to the so-called HD collection, which I think most fans would agree is one of the worst ways to experience Silent Hill 2.
I want to go get it. Is that okay?
Yes. Yes.
I guess my point is that in that regard, there was a benefit to remaking something, because there was a chance there to bring it to an entirely new generation of gamers, along with addressing some of the weaker aspects and points of criticism, with things like the combat and the movement controls, along with adding in more puzzles and environments to really entice returning players into giving it a go as well, which meant that as a result, it appealed to both old and newer audiences, and it succeeded because of that.
Yeah, you're right.
And while I might have my issues with that remake, I do remember being consistently impressed by all of the new stuff that they added in. Whereas I never just felt that same way here with Metal Gear Solid Delta. There was never like any real moment in the game there where I was wowed by something new, really making me wonder why I was playing it to begin with. And I guess that's the whole takeaway about this remake, is just how safely it plays everything. It's just a beat-for-beat remake of that original game with nothing fundamentally changed, and what it does change isn't necessarily for the best. The only times I ever really found myself enjoying this was when it was just doing what Metal Gear Solid 3 had already done before it. Like the intro with Cynthia Harrell's vocals still giving me goosebumps all up my arms and balls, and then that ending still making me cry like a little bitch. But all of this was in Metal Gear Solid 3 to begin with. Certainly not something that ever happened as a result of this thing being updated into Unreal Engine 5. I guess that's why Kojima said he never wanted to play this and nothing to do with it. Probably didn't want to see them messing around with what he surmised was a more or less perfect experience, or at least what he wanted to create in his eyes. And look man, say what you will about the guy, but it's pretty obvious he makes the kind of games he wants, you know, when he's allowed to actually finish them. And at least thankfully there is enough of that DNA in there to make Delta entertaining to play through. So overall, yes, it's far from being any kind of dumpster fire, and I still think it's a perfectly valid way to experience MGS3 for the first time. I just kind of hope that if people do, they'll then spend the time to go back and check it out the way that it's intended. And whilst at the end of the day, this isn't going to go down in the annals of S-tier remake history with things like Resident Evil or System Shock, if nothing else, it's still better than the Twin Snakes.